Hello guys, this is Gameplays, I'm Fabio Pisco and welcome to my channel. And it seems like AMD can't catch a break.
Why?
If you look at it, for example, AMD is losing because of three things, mostly because of three things. The first one is upscaling. The DLSS 3.5 is currently much better, and I repeat, much better than FSR 2.2. FSR 2.2 has its strong points, of course, and it isn't that bad, let's say that. But I mean, even XeSS from Intel, XeSS 1.1 is generally better looking than FSR 2.2, so that's a thing as well. But what I mean with this is that FSR 2.2 is not that bad, but once again, the DLSS 3.5 is much better. And we're still waiting for FSR 3 upscaling, not frame generation upscaling, and AMD didn't say absolutely a thing about it. So we don't know if it will be better, if it will come soon. We don't really know. We just know that FSR 3 frame generation will come. That's what we know for now. The second thing is, like I said before, frame generation. AMD, of course, AMD will let FSR 3 be used by everyone, even NVIDIA owners, and so on, and that's great. But AMD has actually been telling us that FSR 3 would be released like for a year. And after they announced that the FSR 3 would be released in 2 games in the next weeks, well, it's over a month now, or at least a month, and we still have no games with FSR 3. So Immortals of Avium, 0 FSR 3, at least for now, of course, by this day. And Forspoken, also no FSR 3 whatsoever. What I'm saying is that NVIDIA already has like 50 games, or close to 50 games with frame generation, while AMD has zero games with their frame generation technology. And there's simply no card faster than the 4090. But I mean, that's completely fine because AMD does not need to have the fastest card, they don't. They usually have the best price-performance ratio. In light ray tracing games, they can actually match NVIDIA's performance. When we go into high ray tracing, of course they can't. Let's be real, AMD is losing here, hard. And just because of that, I'm gonna leave you with today's sponsor. Today's sponsor is Maximum Settings, a cloud-based gaming service where you won't need to spend thousands of dollars to upgrade your PC or a personal nuclear plant to boot up your system.
Just do it!
And for as low as 9.95 Canadian dollars a month, you can play the most recent games on your computer, even if your hardware isn't prepared. Sign up today for your full Linux gaming PC with no resource sharing and start enjoying high-level gaming on any PC. And this introduction was actually to get into Cyberpunk 2077 once again and to actually give you some context. So for now, we're running, for example, 1440p ultra-wide, as we can see. And as for the graphics, we have, once again, frame generation enabled, the DLSS super resolution imbalanced, and I know we're talking about 1440p and yet the DLSS balance looks pretty okay. I can actually put it on quality mode, there's no problem there. Let me just decrease the sharpness a bit. Quality mode, ultra settings, as we can see, high, ultra, and we're using rasterization. So, with a 4070 Ti, we're still getting, with frame generation, 120 average FPS. This game, rasterized, still looks very good. It's not the best looking game, but definitely looks very good. Now, as soon as we enable ray tracing, so the normal ray tracing, we're talking about ultra ray tracing, everything on, ray trace sliding to ultra. Bam! So we barely got an FPS hit. With frame generation DLSS to quality, we went from 120 FPS to, as you see, 112 FPS, which is basically nothing. We had like a 10 FPS reduction with a 4070 Ti, and we're using ray tracing. So as soon as we use ray tracing, we can immediately see the differences in terms of reflections. Look, for example, at the reflections on the window. As we can see the trees, the palm trees outside. You can see better reflections on the car. Now, as we go to path tracing, because path tracing is, well, it's a much better ray tracing, and path tracing actually shines even against ray tracing is when you're going inside like we are here right now. So let's enable path tracing now. Okay. Now remember the image that you saw. Okay. Look at the difference already. And please don't tell me that you don't see the difference, because if you don't see the difference, you're blind. You're completely blind. Look at the difference. And as you can see, since we're using frame generation with a very low amount of of base FPS, as we can see, you get a lot of ghosting. But as soon, for example, as we use the path tracing with balanced settings, because the base FPS are much higher, the game is now perfectly usable. But you need a higher base value. Now, look at this. In terms of quality, look at this. Look at the floor. Look at the shadows produced. So we now have way better ambient occlusion here, because the light is coming from there, from the outside, and we have better lighting here on the top. We have better lighting on the top of the car, and most likely we have, not most likely, and most of all, most importantly, we have the shadows being produced by the lighting coming from outside to the inside. We have shadows on the cars, we have the shadows here on the cars as well, and look at this ambient occlusion, and at the same time we even have better reflections. So better reflections, better ambient occlusion. Look at the letters. If we go to the side, it's the same thing. Look at how it goes. It's so much more realistic. Look at this. And you can see once again, no, I don't really notice any difference. Look at the shadows once again. Look at the bottom of the car. Look at the wheels. You can see that since lighting is coming from there as well, you can see that there is a bit of light there. But then since we have the wheel here, we have the shadow from the wheel, and then we have the shadow from the lighting that comes there. It's just much more realistic. As soon as we go to the normal ray tracing, once again, now look at it. As you can see, it's day and night. The difference is insane. We have almost no shadows here from the lighting coming from the outside. Almost no lighting here as well. No lighting on the floor. No shadows on the floor. Look, the shadows are minimal, which is not realistic, okay? We should have a bigger shadow there. The same for these things. So they are actually taking light from the outside, and they have absolutely no shadow on this side. And they should have ambient occlusion and shadow on this side, okay? So inside, the difference in between the rasterization, we have rasterization now, and ray tracing is not that big. So the shadows get better, the ambient occlusion gets better as well. As we enable it, bam. As we can see, okay, it's better to look at, and we're still having 130 FPS, which is fine for frame generation. Once again, great reflections, everything, but look at the shadows and the light bouncing inside as soon as we enable path tracing once again. Look at this. As we can see, once again, better lighting here on the rooftop of the cars. We have the shadows here being produced by the car, and the lighting coming from there. Here once again, the shadows from the tires. It's so much more realistic. I mean, it's a bit darker than it should, definitely a bit darker, I agree, but much more realistic. Look, for example, at these objects now. Since we have lighting coming from outside, we can see that these objects now have the proper lighting, the proper ambient occlusion, the proper shadow. And once again, I'm telling you, path tracing is still experimental, so it still has a lot of issues. And as we can see, one of those same issues is that it is too dark. The shadows are too dark and way darker than they should. As we can see here, the shadows shouldn't be as dark. Okay, but they are. But that's one of the cons. But overall, it is much better. Look at how all these objects actually produce a shadow and actually have ambient occlusion. All these little objects like, for example, this bottle, everything inside looks much better. Same here, for example, the chair. You can see a small shadow here from the chair. Everything looks just insanely better. Insanely better in the inside. On the outside, the story is different though. Yeah, it's kind of different. Let's call, for example, another car. Sorry about that. Normal rasterization. As you can see, we can immediately see that the shadows are much softer. Well, that's a bug. The shadows are much softer on the car, for example, as you can see. Look at the bottom there. So they aren't as pronounced as with ray tracing. The normal ray tracing, even the normal ray tracing. The game looks great once again. The game looks great even with rasterization, but the shadows are just not as good. The ambient occlusion as well. Now, as soon as we enable ray tracing, the normal ray tracing, ultra settings once again, as you can see, the shadows are much more defined. Or should I say darker shadows here on this part, because we have the car covering. Then we have lighter shadows here on this portion, so better ambient occlusion. Look at the bottom of the car. The bottom of the car is actually whoa, what's that? That was that was an insane. That was insane, the amount of ghosting. What the hell? Okay, that was a big bug, and that was most likely due to the frame generation. I'm almost certain. Damn, son, that's the first time I see such a thing. The shadows are much more pronounced, okay? So much better, much more defined, and the car just looks much more closer to the ground because the ambient occlusion in the bottom of the car is just much better. It looks just much better. Path tracing, bam. As you see, there isn't really much of a difference in the path tracing. We have a big FPS impact, but at the same time, we don't have much of a difference. The only difference that we see here is that on the side of the car, since we are not getting sun on the side, it is much darker than with normal ray tracing. So the ambient occlusion with path tracing is usually completely different. But look at this. This seems like a much more realistic scenario where we have once again the car stick to the ground, very well stick to the ground, and then we have the shadow, the very defined shadow, and then this side is much darker because it is getting no light whatsoever. And as soon as we go inside once again, the quality is just insane. Look at this. It's just like a movie. Look at the reflections. The biggest selling point of path tracing is actually the insides. Now, we still have some issues with path tracing, and I'll show you, for example, one of them. One of them is the noise. We still get some noise with path tracing. Oh, my bad. One example is this little door. As you can see, we have kind of a glitching, shimmering, and this is due to the path tracing. For example, as soon as we go to the normal ray tracing, this does not happen. Since the light is not bouncing with the path, okay, it's different, so we have no problems, no shimmering whatsoever. Once again, it doesn't look as good, it doesn't look as realistic, but in terms of the outside environment, it looks very, very close to path tracing. Path tracing just looks much better on the inside. It's just on the inside, it's just way, way better. Now, once again, going to path tracing, well, as you can see, even the things passing there. So, once again, look at the shimmering. We have lots of shimmering, and for that, NVIDIA actually released the DLSS Ray Reconstruction. So once again, let me just see the FPS we get. 87 FPS, 86, with the shimmering. As soon as we go to the DLSS Ray Reconstruction, so we have no more shimmering. But at the same time, I found that Ray Reconstruction is actually way worse than having it off. Firstly, I don't really know why, but at least on my computer, Ray Reconstruction works very poorly. Look at, for example, the quality of the graphics. When using Ray Reconstruction, the gun just feels like gumball, so it has no textures whatsoever. Even for example, the thing that you see here, the budget letters on the weapon, they just look blurry. Characters, look at their faces. They're just looking very, very bad, kind of over sharpened, and at the same time just looking very, very poorly. As soon as you disable the Ray Reconstruction, everything looks much better, much sharper, and much cleaner. So at least in my case scenario, Ray Reconstruction does not work well, and I repeat, does not work well. It does reduce the shimmer, but it also increases the blurriness of everything in the game actually, and makes things look overall worse. So this is the city with path tracing. Okay, the game looks very, very good already without it, but with it, it just seems like a whole other experience. As soon as we disable the path tracing, let's do it. Well, let's go to Rasterization. Look, it is a huge difference. The city still looks nice, but as you can see in terms of lighting and in terms of aspect, overall aspect, it is a completely different thing because the path is not being traced for the lights. So the tones are completely different. Okay, we have a more cold tone. We have less lights bouncing and so on. It's completely different. But as you can see, it still looks great. Not gonna lie, it still looks great. It's a marvelous and a good looking game, a very good looking game. As soon as we enable ray tracing, the normal ray tracing, bam, ray tracing ultra settings, it already looks much better. So the lights look much better. The reflections of the cars, the reflections of the buildings, it just looks much better. We also have more reflections from as you can see, for example, in the ground here. We have better reflections, definitely. It just looks much better than the normal rasterization, and we can still push 100 and something FPS, close to 120 FPS, and we can actually go for the quality settings if we want to. It looks a bit darker there than it should. Let me see the path tracing. As we can see, it is already immediately different. It is immediately different because we have, for example, this lighting bouncing to my character, to V. We have these lights bouncing to the streets, so the streets are more yellowish because they have lights bouncing there. In here, since we have the lighting bouncing here as well, the street is a bit more red, so it is a completely different experience. It just looks much better, and we're not even talking about interiors, because interiors, once again, is the strong point of path tracing. But overall, it just looks much better, just much better. It's a whole different experience. Once again, let's look there, or let's look there, for example. Just looks like almost like a movie in terms of lighting. It's just much more realistic. Look at the car. Once again, ray tracing, normal ray tracing. It looks good as well. Not as good in this part, but also looks very good. And now as for Cyberpunk 2.0, the game is just much better. The city just feels much more alive. It's just an awesome update. Not even talking, of course, about the features, about the ray tracing, about the things, overall the things, but or anything, but the game just feels much better. Although it looks great, it just looks great, but even in terms of police, we have way more police cars in the road. We have better mechanics for the cars. The cars do feel different, they sound different. It is just a much better overall game. Look, for example, at the police. As soon as you can actually kill the police, for example, bam, you kill the police, you just fuck them up, and now you have stars like GTA, okay? But the police just doesn't spawn out of nowhere. They just don't. They will come to get you. As you can see on the map, they're already coming there and there. So they are coming to get you, and they will keep coming until they kill you, okay? It's like GTA. Now, you can go there, for example, and you can run. Okay, you can run, but even there, they will ram you. Basically, they will come to you, okay? You can see a lot of noise, for example, there on the ground. That's one of the bad things of path tracing. But they will come to kind of get you. They will follow you, they will ram you, they will try to kill you. They'll do the things. One of the best things and the new things that we have also, and things that we should have from the beginning, is this. So we can actually fight with the cars now. We can actually shoot through the cars. The driving of the cars, the handling of the cars is just much better overall. Just much better. It just feels much more realistic. They kind of brake. They brake harder, depending on the car. Of course, there are cars that brake softer now, others that brake harder. It depends on the car. The accelerations also were changed. Everything was changed in the game. It just looks and feels much better. This is definitely a Cyberpunk 2.0 because the game overall looks much better in every specific scenario. It's just much better, not even comparable. Oh, my bad. Just looks much better. Look at this. And now I'm almost there, evading the police. I need to go away. Look at these graphics. These graphics look great. Path tracing is still not perfect, not even close to perfect, but definitely looks great. It's a huge impact in terms of performance, definitely. And is it worth it? In my opinion, well, not really. Unless you have, let's say, at minimum a 4080 or a 4090. With a 4090, it is worth it because you could be pushing, let's say, 120 average FPS at the same settings with a 4090. So it is worth it for 4090 users. But overall, it isn't worth it at all. The difference isn't worth it. You're just better using the normal ray tracing, okay? But once again, the game just looks great, and it is much better now. Do I advise you to play Cyberpunk now and actually finish the Phantom Liberty DLC? I actually advise to do it because, I mean, the game is just much better. AI is much better. Small things were improved in terms of AI, for example, like this thing, that the character moves away from the others, kind of doing a shoulder path. Before this, the character would just pass through them, most likely. The fighting is also better, new weapons, everything is just so much better. The police, the AI, it's just a completely new and much better experience. As for the graphics, of course, AMD is still quite behind. AMD cards can't run path tracing. Even the 4070 Ti can do decently, once again, with frame generation, and the DLSS balanced, of course, can do decently, not good, decently, but not even a 7900 XT can do even close to this. Not even mentioning that we don't have frame generation yet on the AMD side, sorry, but even if we did, it would still not be enough to play decently with the path tracing, and even ray tracing. It is really heavy on Cyberpunk 2077. So that's what I can say. The game just looks great, even in terms of rasterization. If you're playing the game in terms of rasterization, sorry, it looks great. But as you can see, it's a major difference here, for example, from path tracing. This is rasterization, the normal performance, let's say. As soon as we go to ray tracing, just to finish the video, we have lots of lighting here. It's much better already, looks much better than the rasterization. And as soon as we go to path tracing, it looks even better. Once again, bam, the lighting is just much more realistic. And well, with this video I just wanted to show you a bit of Cyberpunk's 2077 performance right now, a bit of path tracing, ray tracing, rasterization, and the DLSS Ray Reconstruction and what I found about it. Not really much in detail, just watching it in real gameplay and what Cyberpunk did increase or did improve. Once again, the police AI, the weapons, the way that the cars sound, different cars have different sounds. It is just a completely whole experience, and you should definitely, and I repeat, you should definitely try and play it, because it has a very nice story and definitely looks great. For example, in these scenarios is where path tracing actually thrives the most, but at the same time it has lots of noise, as you can see there. For example, on the side of the door, it has lots of noise, and it just doesn't look as good. For example, in this scenario, I like rasterization more in terms of the reflections. It just looks much more natural, but in terms of ambient occlusion, for example, on the side of the car in the bottom, ray tracing just looks much better, and yeah, it's just much more realistic, much more ambient occlusion. Looks better, definitely, with path tracing looking even better. And well guys, that's all for today's video. Thanks a lot for watching. Don't forget to hit like, subscribe and share this video if you like it. And sorry for the boring video, for the very boring video, but I actually wanted to show you what this card could actually do in this scenario, and what Cyberpunk looks right now, and what options you actually have, and what changes in between rasterization, ray tracing and path tracing. Thank you very much, and see you in the next video.